Inyou is an ugly, pathetic loner who acts like a boss, but he's just a walking disaster, charging people to save lives and hoping hot waifus flash him as a tip. This so-called angler struts around like a legend, but deep down, he's just a moody loser with lightning tricks that barely make up for his lack of social skills. Man's got the charisma of a wet sock and the work ethic of a broke gambler. If Zero ever quits, this dude's entire life would crumble faster than his fake persona. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to show some love and hit that thumbs up. Let's begin. 30 years ago, a new continent called Magmel appeared, full of unknown plants and creatures. Curious to explore it, people sent a large army there. Among them was a young, white-haired boy who realized they were being hunted by a creature. Eager to test his skills and become the king of this new era, he attacked it. Later, a robot and a strange boy in a uniform arrived, only to find the entire group dead. Years passed, and it was revealed that some people had learned to navigate Magmel. One of them was the boy in uniform, the protagonist, Inyou, an angler who rescues and explores Magmel. In a Japanese coastal town, a sickly blonde boy named Crix entered an alley and went down some stairs. Meanwhile, Inyou was in bed until his apprentice urged him to get up, saying it was a beautiful day. Inyou responded that more people die on sunny days than rainy ones, making her leave. Crix arrived at Inyou's door, but due to his illness, he fainted. Later, he woke up to Inyou in front of him and apologized before asking for his help to save his brother, offering all his money. Inyou refused, saying it wasn't enough for such a dangerous task. Crix explained that he had been sick since childhood and wouldn't live long, so after his death, Inyou could take his insurance money as payment. After seeing his apprentice's sad eyes, Inyou accepted and asked for details. Crix said his parents and older brother had gone to Magmel to find something called a tear of Epona to cure him. His brother had promised they would visit Magmel together, but later returned alone, covered in wounds and blaming himself for their parents' deaths. Over time, Crix watched his brother train hard until he got a license and formed a team to return to Magmel, again promising to get the tear. But this time, he had a serious look in his eyes. Back in the present, Inyou agreed to go on the rescue mission, as the tear of Epona was valuable. They took a helicopter to Magmel, with Inyou explaining the dangers of the land. His apprentice monitored them from a control room. They used a trained mount for travel, and Inyou warned Crix that Magmel was home to some of the world's worst murders. To enter legally, one needed a license, but as an angler, Inyou had special privileges. At a cliff, they used a drone, and their mount ran away, which didn't surprise them. As they walked through the jungle, Crix explained that the tear of Epona could make a person 10 times stronger. Inyou then revealed that its name came from growing on a mountain of corpses. Finally, Inyou asked what Crix wanted to do once healed, and Crix said he wanted to become a Lochter, shocking him. Crix says that Lochters are fighters with special skills, and while many believe they are just a myth, he thinks they are real. Suddenly, he falls to his knees, exhausted from his illness, and asks if they can rest. Inyou contacts his apprentice, Zero, who uses her drone to drop a strange fruit that helps fight fatigue. After walking further, they see a man with a giant insect on his head, begging for help. Crix wants to save him, but Inyou says it's too late. He throws a stone nearby, causing huge centipedes to emerge. He explains that these creatures use living people as bait to hunt. Before moving on, Inyou releases a small black lightning bolt from his hand, slicing the centipedes into pieces. The man, smiling, falls to the ground. As they continue, a sensor in Inyou's pocket starts beeping, signaling that Crix's brother is alive. Zero confirms they are heading in the right direction, but warns of dangerous birds nearby. Inyou tells Crix to stay put while he deals with them. He summons a black lightning sword and leaps into action, killing the birds one by one until the rest flee. Meanwhile, Crix reunites with his older brother Kunuris, who is shocked to see him. They argue about the danger of Magmel before Kunuris shows him Epona. When Crix steps closer, he is horrified to see it growing on a mountain of corpses. Enraged that there aren't enough bodies, Kunuris grabs a sharp bone and stabs Crix in the back. As Crix collapses, his brother reveals he brought so many companions to Magmel to feed the flower. The plant reacts, opening up to reveal its fruit. Just as Kunuris reaches for it, Inyou arrives, shielding Crix and calling Zero for first aid. Ignoring Kunuris, he demands to know if he was the one who killed their parents and friends for Epona's fruit. Inyou tells him that even if he gets the fruit, Crix's illness won't be cured, so it should go to someone who will live longer. Kunuris mocks Crix for trying to save him despite his weak body. Zero finishes first aid, but says it's too late. In his last moments, Crix tells Inyou to save his brother, believing something has possessed him. He thanks Inyou for bringing him this far before dying and reuniting with his parents. Kunuris is glad Crix is dead, but before he finishes speaking, Inyou punches him, explaining that Magmel's true danger is the suffering and evil it brings out in people. Furious, Kunuris eats Epona's fruit, becoming stronger and punching Inyou into a rock. However, Inyou barely reacts and strikes back, sending Kunuris crashing to the ground. As Kunuris weakly looks up, he sees a Lochter above him. Realizing the only way to save someone like him is to end his life, Inyou smashes him into the ground, killing him. Later, Later, after burying Crix, Inyou returns home and tells Zero he is glad she is with him. She replies that she feels the same way. In a research base inside Magmel Forest, two scientists talk about how, if their experiment succeeds, modern medicine will advance a lot. As they discuss their future plans after completing the research, an alarm suddenly goes off. When they check the security cameras, they see a large group of horned bears attacking the base. Meanwhile, Inyou has a nightmare from his childhood. He collapses from exhaustion before a tall figure who tells him that what he feels isn't despair and reaches out a hand to help him up. Just before he can grab the hand, the figure disappears. Suddenly, Zero's voice calling him wakes him up in fear. His first reaction is to look at the map of Magmel on the wall. A few hours later, a blonde woman checks some directions written on a piece of paper and arrives at Inyou's house. In a memory, we see her father, a scientist, telling her that if something happened to him, she should find Inyou. She rings the doorbell, and despite Inyou's strong physique, Zero looks at him disapprovingly when she realizes the woman wants him to save someone. The woman asks him to follow her, and when she first sees Inyou, she doubts he is the famous angler she has heard about. She explains that she lost contact with her father's lab and that he was the head of the Kyokusei's practical lifeform research department. Inyou is surprised since such a big company should have its own rescue team and tells her to rely on them. But she insists that her father told her to find Inyou if something went wrong. Inyou asks if there's a reward, saying it would be selfish to risk one life to save another for nothing. This upsets the woman, who finds his refusal cruel, but she begs him, saying he is the only one she can count on. She calls him Shuin, making him recall the figure from his dream, but he denies being Shuin, confusing her. She tries to find proof that Inyou is the person she's looking for, but he stands up and says that even if he's not Shuin, he will handle it. They head to the helicopter where they meet a man named Owens who calls the woman Amelia. She introduces Inyou as her younger brother to avoid suspicion, and they leave. On the way, Inyou asks who her little brother is, and Amelia explains that pretending to be family is safer than bringing a stranger. Meanwhile, Zero prepares for the mission by summoning black lightning and activating a large screen while sending her drone to scout. At Magmel's lab, a security guard tries to fight the creatures, but is killed. Inside, scientists watch in horror as their colleagues are slaughtered. On the plane, Inyou and Amelia study their enemy, horned bears that usually eat hot minerals, but turn their skin into steel and go berserk when provoked. The leader of the soldiers reports that there are about 30 creatures around the laboratory and says it's an emergency, at least until they arrive. The soldiers laugh, but Inyou interrupts them, saying that every year, about 950,000 people disappear on the new continent, and only a third ever return. One soldier praises his knowledge, but says they will make sure more than a third survive this time. Meanwhile, inside the lab, cameras detect the rescue team arriving. The soldiers fire their special bullets, killing many beasts. Inyou is surprised, but the leader explains the bullets are made from a metal found in Magmel. However, Inyou is more curious about why the creatures attack the lab. The leader dismisses it, saying they are just violent, making Inyou suspicious. The soldiers parachute in and shoot the bears from above, but Zero suddenly warns Inyou that something big is coming. He sees a massive lizard, taller than the trees, heading their way, attracted by the blood of the bears. The lizard hurls giant rocks at the ship using its tail. The leader orders a retreat after losing their only missile that could stop the monster. Inyou grabs Amelia and jumps out of the plane as the others escape. On the ground, he investigates the broken missile and tells Amelia to fix it if she really wants to save her father. While she works, Inyou summons black lightning and builds a structure around the weapon. He then asks her which should die, the lizard or the people in the lab. He also questions why Magmel appeared in this world, saying it's because the world was too boring. The scientists see Inyou standing on top of the lizard through their cameras. The leader of the lab recognizes his clothes and thinks of Shuin. He agrees to release the hostages while Amelia finishes fixing the missile. Inyou lures the lizard to a precise spot and orders Amelia to fire. The creature tries to dodge, but Inyou creates a giant hand to push it into the missile's path, making it explode. Amelia's father frees captured bear cubs. Later, on the ship, Inyou explains the bears attacked only to save their cubs. The leader reveals that refining their blood creates the hardest metal in the world. Inyou tells him he came because Amelia called him. Hours later, the news reports their ship crashed mysteriously, but everyone survived. Amelia tells Inyou her father will never return to the new continent. That afternoon, Inyou walks along the beach, talking to Zero's drone, saying one day he will grow up. Zero cheerfully replies that it will happen to him too. Inyou and Zero are watching TV. When Inyou reaches for a pudding on the table, Zero smacks his hand and takes it, claiming it's hers. They continue watching the screen, which shows an auction featuring a rare creature from Magmel called the Seven-Colored Bird, a bird that can remove any poison. Inyou and Zero discuss how this bird is found in the 45th ward of the new continent, where many poisonous creatures live. The bidding starts with huge amounts of money, and while they talk about how rich some people are, Inyou sneaks a pudding for himself. The bidding ends with the bird being sold for 1 billion esky. Zero jokes that with that much money, he could buy a pudding factory. The auction winners enter with the bird, and after sitting down, a man named Daysum explains how he earned all that money. He says he worked hard to get the bird and now needs Inyou's help to find his friends in Ward 45. Inyou tells him to give up, saying the area is too dangerous and his friends are probably dead. Daysum explains that they were immigrants and that 30 years have passed since the Magmel incident. Back then, people had to work together to survive. He, Stua, and Stein were always together, even making insects fight for fun. After a fight, Daysum suggested collecting more insects to find the strongest one. Inyou finds this cruel and asks if his friends were poisoned, to which Daysum says yes. He escaped out of fear and later couldn't tell anyone. When the immigration plan failed, they had to leave, losing contact with Stua and Stein's families. Since then, Daysum worked hard to earn money and buy the bird, hoping it could cure his friends. Inyou tells him they are likely dead, but Daysum insists he needs to be sure. He offers Inyou money, who then agrees. After telling Daysum his clothes aren't suitable for travel, he asks Zero to fix them. In Magmel, Daysum feels nostalgic and tells Inyou he's doing a good thing by helping people. Inyou replies that he only helps for money and not everyone can be saved. Zero's drone detects a monster ahead, but it's not visible. They reach an open, peaceful-looking area with flowers. Inyou gets suspicious and grabs the flowers. Suddenly, vines attack him, but he defends himself with black lightning, creating machine guns to shoot the creature. A flying insect emerges from the smoke and tries to attack, but Inyou dodges it. The moth keeps flying and sprays a sticky thread on Inyou, tying him up, but he creates giant metal hands, grabs the thread, and throws the insect into the air. Calmly, he picks up the flowers and feeds them to the bird, explaining to Daysum that these flowers are poisonous to humans, but are the bird's favorite food. He then questions whether poison and medicine are just based on human needs. After walking for a while, Daysum finds a tree with a mark he carved as a child to help him find his way back. Excited, he runs toward a clearing where a cave is located. Before entering, Inyou sends a drone to investigate. Daysum remembers the accident. He had put a worm, a scorpion, and a bat in a jar, and when he opened it, poisonous vapors escaped, poisoning his friends. Filled with regret, he smashes the container on the ground, feeling guilty for running away back then. However, Inyou tells him his friends are still alive. From the darkness, a giant scorpion appears. Seeing its hair, Daysum realizes it's Stuart, his old friend. But Stuart, now a monster, attacks him. They barely dodge in time. Daysum tries to remind him of their past. Then, a huge bat flies in and fights the scorpion. When Daysum sees it wearing his friend's glasses, he recognizes it as Stein and is happy he's alive too. However, Stein doesn't recognize him and attacks, forcing Inyou to push Daysum to safety. Daysum believes using the bird's ability could cure them and turn them human again. While the two monsters fight, he runs toward the cage, but Inyou warns him that the cure will kill them since they now need the poison to survive. The creatures then lead Daysum and Inyou to the marked tree, showing they remember him and their childhood. Daysum decides not to kill them, believing it would be selfish, and releases the bird. Back home, Inyou and Zero watch Daysum give a speech, promising to use profits to help families affected by Magmel and to build a pudding factory. When asked why pudding, he says it was an extra condition. Inyou, happy, grabs pudding, but Zero steals it, saying he can only eat one every 20 days, which annoys him. Inyou and Zero go to the market. Zero sees something that looks tasty and wants to try it, but Inyou tells her she can only have half and can only spend 30 ESC. She feels annoyed, thinking he's too stingy. When she tries to buy it, the seller tells her it costs 40 ESK, but she only gives him 30. The seller refuses, saying he can't lower the price for everyone. Zero argues that if the next buyer pays 10 ESK more, he will still make the same amount. Amused, the seller agrees to sell it to her for 30 SC. Seeing how good it looks, Inyou decides to buy one too, but the seller now says it costs 50 SC, which frustrates him. Suddenly, they hear a crowd making a fuss and go to see what's happening. People are talking about Belina Australia, a pale blonde woman who has entered Magmel 8 times. She makes a big announcement, saying that since wars continue and orphan children still suffer, she will go back to Magmel to help as many as she can. The crowd cheers for her, but Zero notices Inyou looking at her with a cold, serious expression. He calls her Bloody Maria and says she is not a miracle worker. Later, at their base, Zero looks up Belena's history and learns she once risked her life in Magmel to bring back treasures and donated everything to an orphanage. Zero thinks she is a good person, but remembers Inyou's harsh words and wonders why he said that. Using her drone, she checks the orphanage and sees the children playing happily, except for one girl crying by some flowers. This surprises Zero, reminding her of her painful past. Belena approaches the girl and asks what's wrong. The child says her friend Momo is missing, so Belena promises to find him, making the girl smile and hug her. Zero keeps watching until she notices Belena looking in her direction, but Belena doesn't seem to see her and takes the girl inside. Zero then deactivates her abilities, making the drone controller and TV disappear. Just then, Inyou enters, grabs a book, and sees the computer screen showing information on Belena, triggering a childhood memory. He remembers standing on a cliff with a white-haired boy when they heard a woman scream. Looking down, they saw Belena being attacked by a monster. The boy warned Inyou that the creature was dangerous and told him to stay back. The boy jumped down, but before he could act, Belena used her materialization powers to create a giant book, knocking the monster unconscious. Inyou also climbed down and saw the white-haired boy tell Belena the area was too dangerous for a woman alone and that she should leave. She refused, saying she had a greater purpose. Inyou, blushing, exchanged glances with her before running after his master. That night, while the boy slept, Inyou couldn't stop worrying and secretly went to find Belena. After searching, he finally found her but was horrified by what he saw. Back in the present, Inyou stares at the computer screen, thinking she is a devil's mistake. Later that afternoon, a group of people arrives at his base, begging him to help Belena, saying the orphans will suffer without her. But after hearing their pleas, Inyou coldly refuses, making the people look at him with anger and disappointment. Inyou keeps mocking the people, saying that if Belena is truly a saint or a miracle worker, she should be fine on her own. He sarcastically adds that since he isn't one, anything could happen to him, which angers the crowd even more. They insist he should help her for the children's sake, but Inyou asks if any of them are willing to go with her. The room falls silent until one man admits he hasn't been able to contact any of Belena's past companions. Inyou points out that she usually goes alone, calling it a farce, but the people argue that those who joined her did so willingly. Zero interrupts, saying she believes Belena is a good person who helps children. She and Inyou exchange a look before he refuses again, upsetting Zero, who decides to help on her own. Everyone leaves, and Zero uses her drone while Inyou reluctantly takes his helicopter to find Belena. Through her drone, Zero sees that Belena's companions were either badly injured or killed by monsters. Inyou arrives and finds a huge herd of creatures. Knowing there are too many, he creates crossbows and rains arrows down on them. Suddenly, a powerful roar catches his attention. It's the same type of monster his master fought when they first met Belena. This triggers a memory of Inyou asking why Shuin saved Belena if she was bad. Shuin replied that he helps those who need saving, regardless of good or bad. Back in the present, the monster fires a laser, setting trees on fire. Inyou dodges, blocks with an axe, and strikes the monster's head, scaring it away. After stopping the fire, he finds Belena pulling organs from a dead monster, saying they sell for a high price to help children. Inyou tells her many of her companions died, but she says they followed her willingly and continues working. More monsters appear, and Belena eagerly runs toward them. Inyou tries to stop her, but Zero, seeing her crazed expression, tells them they should leave. As they go, the monsters devour their fallen companion. Days later, news spreads that Belena died in Magmel, but her followers believe she became a goddess. A girl Belena once helped cries, but Zero's drone accidentally bumps into Momo, revealing it was just a stuffed animal she loved. Later, Inyou and Zero walk through the market, discussing how good and evil are human-made ideas. They return to the same food stand, and this time, Inyou is the one being treated. They enjoy their food together as they continue walking. Hey guys, I know I'm interrupting the video, but I'm just here to remind you that most of you guys watching this video are not actually subscribed to the channel. So if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you click that subscribe button and hit the notification bell for more updates in the future. Now let's get straight back into the video. After Magmel appeared, a man was inspired by the stories of a pirate, a hunter, a gourmet, and a manga editor. Hearing about the dangers of the new continent, where many never returned, he thought they were fools. Yet he too wanted to reach those mysterious lands. Somehow, he ended up trapped, buried up to his waist in the middle of nowhere. He panicked when the ground shook, realizing something big was approaching. He struggled to turn around, but when he finally did, it was too late. A giant, hungry, carnivorous turtle was already on top of him, drooling as it prepared to eat him. Terrified, he desperately tried to escape, but in the end, he was so scared that he wet himself. Accepting his fate, he recalled how he ended up there. His name was Denden, and he worked in a store in the city. One day, he read that Magmel was full of opportunities, making him wonder if he should move there. Just then, Inyou and his apprentice, posing as father and daughter, entered his store. Inyou always tricked and stressed him to the point where he felt he would have a heart attack. Zero pointed at an expensive fish and asked if they are splurging that day. Inyou lied, saying the store owner was his best friend and would give him a discount, which annoyed Denden. From the moment they met, Inyou made him feel like he was going to die. Their first interaction was over a flashbang grenade, which Inyou haggled down from 4100 C to just 800, claiming it was faulty. To Denden's shock, Inyou proved it by making it explode. The rumor hurt his business, but Inyou kept coming back, using fake money, faking accidents, and trying ridiculous tricks to get discounts. This time, Denden prepared, checking stock, securing the counter, and even installing security cameras. When Inyou and Zero bought items worth 60,000 ES, he braced for a trick, but Inyou casually paid with a card, saying he wasn't worried about discounts today. Just as Denden relaxed, Zero's drone made a wooden plank fall, and with fake blood, she pretended to die. Inyou demanded a discount, then walked off carrying her, while Zero turned and smirked at Denden, who realized he'd been fooled again. Frustrated, he decided it was better to risk dying in Magmel than keep dealing with Inyou, so he laughed and prepared to chase his dream of becoming rich. The next day, Denden closes closes his store and sets off on a large motorcycle-like vehicle, wondering if it will really take him to Magmel. Before he can think too much, Inyou and Zero climb aboard and ask him to take them home. Though annoyed, he agrees, and they ride through a huge field of windmills. Denden starts to doubt the path, but they assure him it's correct and complain he's too slow. When they reach a red light, Denden boasts that he was once a very fast driver and promises to prove it. Inyou and Zero don't believe him, so as the light is about to turn green, Inyou secretly cuts the brakes and they both sneak off. When the light changes, Denden speeds off, proud of himself, until he realizes they're gone. At another light, he tries to stop but finds the brakes don't work. A huge truck nearly crashes into him, but he barely avoids it. Just as he feels relieved, he realizes he's on the edge of a cliff, slips, and falls into the sea. He nearly drowns but is saved when Inyou throws him afloat. Realizing his motorcycle wouldn't get him to Magmel, he decides to sail. Using 30 years of savings, he buys a boat and feels proud, until he finds Inyou and Zero on board again. They see his supplies and weapons and joke that he's like a criminal, which he denies since they're the ones always buying weapons. Inyou then creates a grenade, explaining his power, lets him analyze materials, and recreate objects he has studied. He hands Denden the grenade, but the safety ring is missing. Panicked, Denden throws it, but it lands on the boat. With no choice, he jumps into the sea just before the explosion, losing all his savings. Still determined, he tries hang and gliding since he has no money for a plane. Mid-flight, he realizes he doesn't know the direction to Magmel and can't check his map. Inyou appears using Zero's drone and creates a huge fan, sending Denden soaring out of control. He crashes into a truck carrying pigs bound for Magmel, unknowingly reaching his dream destination. Back to the start, he's buried up to his waist with a giant turtle behind him, waiting to eat him. Just before it does, Inyou saves him, making Denden overjoyed. Believing Inyou truly sees him as a friend, he happily promises to visit his store again. Inyou is watching a big screen with a cat on it, remembering his childhood with Shuin in a wooden house built on a large tree. Meanwhile, Zero excitedly watches a TV show about kittens, finding them adorable. After a while, she decides she wants to adopt a kitten and asks Inyou if they can have one, but he refuses. When she asks why, he says he hates cats, which shocks her. She finds it hard to believe because cats are so cute and even help people relax from work stress by watching cat videos online. However, Inyou claims it's a conspiracy. An evil force is using cat videos to weaken people's fighting instincts so they work harder. Zero doesn't believe him and points to his cap, which has kitten-shaped badges. When she asks if they are important to him, he recalls his past with his teacher. Inyou once asked Shuin why he was quiet, and Shuin admitted he had a family but couldn't protect them, so they were no longer alive. When Inyou asked if he wasn't strong enough, Shuin replied that he was stronger than anyone and tried harder than anyone, but he still failed because he was a fool. He then told Inyou to become a wise person. Days later, under Shuin's supervision, Inyou faced a monster. Before he could fight it, Shuin stepped in and defeated it himself. That night, Inyou, frustrated, told Shuin he could have handled it alone and demonstrated his improved skills by creating a knife with his power, but Shuin said it was still too early for him. The next morning, while walking alone through the jungle, Inyou came across the bodies of monster hunters. Then he heard a small sound and discovered a scared cat-like creature. Seeing that Inyou meant no harm, the little animal approached him while Shuin secretly watched from a tree. Back home, Inyou decided to name the creature Toto. One night, while carving a cat-shaped badge, he cut himself. Shuin stepped in to finish it and stopped Toto from approaching the blood. Later, Shuin gave Inyou a cap with an embroidered badge, keeping one for himself. They spent the night peacefully together. Back in the present, Zero understands that the badges are precious because Shuin made them. Finally, she asks what happened to Toto. As time passed, Toto never acted like a normal pet, but he always stayed with Inyou, following him everywhere. One day, while trying to cross a river, Toto, afraid of water, made Inyou carry him, but Inyou slipped. Toto quickly grabbed a stick to help him, and when he saw Inyou was okay, he happily jumped into his arms. Inyou trained Toto to do tricks like chasing a stick, though it sometimes got them into trouble, and they became great friends. Shuin watched over them the whole time. One day, while walking in the jungle, Inyou heard a man crying for help. The man had stepped into a trap and was badly injured. When Inyou asked how it happened, the man claimed he didn't see it, but Inyou suspected he was lying, knowing that Magmel's creatures weren't dumb enough to fall into traps. Before helping, he checked the man's bag and found a rare bird, valuable on the black market. Realizing the man was a poacher, Inyou set the bird free, angering the man, who pulled out a gun and threatened to shoot. While they argued, Toto licked the man's wound. Then, suddenly, the small creature began growing rapidly until it transformed into a huge monster. Without warning, Toto slashed the man with its claws, killing him instantly. The sudden transformation caused the necklace it wore to break and fall to the ground. Shocked by the story, Zero asks what happened next, and Inyou, with a serious look, tells her he had to kill Toto. This disturbs Zero, but Inyou continues, explaining that after Toto killed the man, it began eating the corpse. Then, realizing Inyou was there, it attacked him. him. He was only saved because Shuin intervened. Shuin explained that creatures like Toto transform when they taste human blood. Worried, Inyou asked if there was a way to turn him back, but Shuin said no, and reminded him that Magmel was not a normal place. Accepting this harsh truth, Inyou created a sword and prepared to fight. At first, his attacks failed, and Toto knocked him down. As Toto moved closer, Inyou remembered their time together and hesitated. But as Toto looked at his broken collar, something changed in his eyes, and Inyou, with a quick strike, ended the fight. Hours later, as he buried Toto's body, Shuin gave him the badge from Toto's necklace, reminding him it wasn't his fault. When the story ends, Inyou and Zero sit in silence. Then Inyou tells her it was the first time he had killed a monster, and that in Magmel, you either kill or be killed. He apologizes and asks if she can wait a little longer before getting a pet. Just as Zero is about to respond, a customer rings the bell. A crying girl enters, saying her pet, Luca, is missing. She shows them a drawing of a cat moving Inyou. He reassures her that they will find it, making the girl happy. However, she corrects him. Luca is actually a dog. Seeing Inyou's positive attitude despite his painful past, Zero smiles and jokes that no matter how you look at him, he is definitely a dog. Well, if I continue with the story, my gym membership might be canceled. Emma, take the charge from here.
Flying over Magmel, Amelia and Owens arrive at a place called the Octagon of Evil, an area where many planes have crashed. Owens believes their ship is too advanced to be taken down since it's the biggest and strongest helicopter in the world, made from Magmel's toughest mineral. He knows the reports show this area is dangerous, but if they can figure out why, it will benefit their company. As they go deeper, frog-like creatures in the water watch them approach. Suddenly, the creatures start hurling large rocks at the ship, using their long tongues like catapults. The soldiers fight back with cannons and machine guns, but soon, too many projectiles come at once, and they lose control of the engines. Then, something strikes the ship. Through the cameras, Amelia sees a human-shaped figure with an extremely long arm, grabbing the helicopter and pulling it down, crashing it. As the frogs croak, a short humanoid with a creepy smile appears. Meanwhile, in the city, Chester visits Inyou's base, where he and Zero are talking about marshmallows. Since Zero bought a huge amount at a low price, she decides they'll eat only marshmallows for every meal. Then, Chester knocks and tells them his daughter has disappeared in Magmel. Inyou finds this ironic since last time it was the other way around. Chester shows where she went and asks for help, explaining that they were attacked by an unknown force even while on the ship. Inyou agrees to help, but demands double the reward. Chester then comments that Inyou resembles his mother, Shuin. Annoyed, Inyou increases his price to triple. Chester, worried for his daughter, agrees, but makes Inyou eat a ton of marshmallows to use up Zero's stash. Meanwhile, at the crash site, Amelia decides to leave the ship. Owens warns her it's dangerous, but she argues that if the attacker wanted them dead, it would have struck again. Ignoring his protests, she runs off and finds a graveyard of crashed planes and ships. Suddenly, she sees the same humanoid from before, but it teleports onto a tree branch behind her. As Inyou and Chester prepare to leave, Inyou tells Zero to send a drone ahead. She obeys, but hands them marshmallows for the trip, which they refuse. Later, Amelia returns to Owens, who was worried, and he tells her a rescue team is coming. On his way to Magmel, Chester is relieved to hear the same news. However, Inyou says it's a shame. Chester is confused until Inyou explains that once they arrive, he'll understand. At that moment, the air fleet reaches the Octagon of Evil, but just like before, the frogs bombard them with rocks. The small humanoid creature also joins, throwing its long arms. The helicopters collide midair, crashing one after another, taking down the entire fleet with little effort, shocking both Owens and Amelia. On the way, Inyou asks Zero for an update, and she confirms that what he said before was true. The creature is Aaron. Chester, surprised, asks about the name, and Inyou tells him to check the camera. Chester sees a small humanoid figure in the distance, staring at the helicopter. Meanwhile, the frogs approach the downed ship, and a worried Owens orders the soldiers to fight. He also knows about Aaron and explains that he is a native of the continent. Remembering her encounter with Aaron, Amelia runs toward the scene. As Inyou and Chester arrive, they discuss Aaron, wondering if people already knew about him. Just then, Zero confirms the ship's location and spots Amelia alive running through the trees. Inyou tells Chester. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, Emilia tries to stop the soldiers from attacking Aaron as he dislikes weapons, but they ignore her and open fire when they see him. Aaron dodges quickly, using his long limbs to disarm them. Two soldiers fire a missile at him, but when the dust settles, Aaron is unharmed and disarms the remaining guards. The soldiers retreat as Inyou's helicopter arrives, catching Aaron's attention. Zero reports that he has spotted them, and Inyou asks Chester if he has a weapon. Chester confirms he does because of the dangers in the area. Suddenly, Aaron stretches an arm toward the helicopter. Inyou jumps out with Chester just before it is destroyed. Luckily, the drone catches them mid-air and takes them toward Amelia. She explains that Aarons are powerful native creatures, and at least 30 have been found on the continent. They share two traits. They look somewhat human and have intelligence equal to or greater than humans. Father and daughter reunite as Aaron approaches. Emilia insists Aaron isn't bad. He just hates weapons. Chester already knows and suggests Inyou handle it. As Inyou nears, Aaron quickly attacks. Seeing it as a game, Inyou accepts the challenge and they fight, dodging and throwing attacks non-stop. Eventually, Inyou gains the upper hand and defeats Aaron with one last move. Emilia rushes over, scolding Inyou, thinking he killed Aaron, but Inyou corrects her, revealing that Aaron is just buried under a giant pile of marshmallows. Aaron emerges with some marshmallows, tastes them, and loves them. He and the frogs happily start eating, surprising everyone. Zero joins them. Inyou then tells Aaron they are not enemies, and Aaron replies that they just want to live in peace. Inyou promises not to enter their land again. Chester apologizes to Inyou for the trouble, and since this is the second time he's helped them, wants to repay him. Inyou asks for a new helicopter and anything except marshmallows. Just then, the frogs, who now love marshmallows, start croaking, and Zero says she understands them. The mission ends happily for everyone. Inyou and Zero's drone are gathering food in Magmel when Zero picks up a mushroom. Inyou warns her that it's deadly, making her panic and drop it. As he lies down on the grass, Zero scolds him, saying they're in this situation because she wasted money. When he gets up, he spots a bright light deep in the forest and decides to check it out. He reaches a small, strange village filled with tiny brothers, and Zero finds it creepy and suspects ghosts, so she sends her drone to investigate. Suddenly, from the bushes, a man with a rifle points at Inyou. Later, Inyou is tied up in what looks like a cafeteria while the man, Taboo, fills ammo boxes. Inyou asks if he lives alone but gets no response. Noticing that the place was once a cafeteria, he asks for coffee, but again, silence. After a pause, Taboo finally asks why Inyou is there. Inyou explains he was just looking for food and doesn't want trouble. The hunter eyes him through his rifle's scope, then picks up a knife. As he slowly moves closer, Zero gets tense, but instead of harming Inyou, Taboo cuts his ropes and frees him. Inyou jokes again about having coffee, but when Taboo stays silent, he decides to leave. However, before going, he notices a photo of Taboo with a woman. Seeing him looking, Taboo sternly orders him to leave, and Inyou obeys. Zero calls him rude. Outside, Inyou picks up some eye-shaped fruits, showing them to the drone. Zero finds them disgusting, but Inyou insists they're sweet and delicious. She still refuses to eat them. Meanwhile, in the cafeteria, Taboo looks at the photo and remembers his past when he served coffee while his daughter grew it. Back in the present, a creature suddenly attacks Inyou. He and Zero are excited because the monster's meat is high quality, so they decide to hunt it. Inyou attacks with his powers, but the creature dodges and runs. They chase it to a clearing, but just as they corner it, a massive underground monster bursts out and swallows it before disappearing back into the ground. Zero is shocked, but Inyou explains that these creatures live underground and only come out when hungry. He has never seen one in person before. As they walk, they come across a cemetery and decide to investigate. They find a grave with fresh flowers. As Inyou approaches, a gunshot barely misses his foot. It's Taboo, reminding him that he was told to leave. Silence fills the air until Taboo reloads and fires another warning shot, even closer to Inyou's head. He orders Inyou to leave, so Inyou walks away into the trees. Zero, annoyed, says it's wrong to point a gun at people, but then realizes that maybe Taboo was protecting something important. Back at the grave, Taboo hears a loud roar and runs toward the sound with his weapon ready. He reaches a clearing and checks through his scope for danger. Suddenly, the same underground monster from earlier leaps out of the ground. It has a drill-shaped face. Seeing it, Taboo instantly recognizes the creature and remembers the day he lost his daughter. In his memory, the monster attacked the village, causing destruction. As villagers fled, a little girl cried, and a man tried to help her. However, by doing so, he was nearly eaten. Another armed man intervened, stopping the creature just in time. The gunman fired more shots at the creature, which now had its attention fixed on him. However, the bullets seemed to do nothing until suddenly, a powerful shot pierced one of the monster's eyes, and Taboo appeared. He took responsibility for killing the beast and asked his partner to run away, but the beast, with a powerful blow, knocked down a building, throwing huge logs of wood on top of it. In the present, the hunter notices that it is the same monster as last time because it is missing one of its eyes, so he tries to target the other. However, his eyesight begins to fail, causing him to miss the shot. This shot alerts Inyou, and as the creature approaches, Taboo points again in the direction of one of its eyes. However, he is hit hard and thrown against a stone. Seeing this, Zero tells Inyou that they should help the man. However, he answers that he is not someone who seems to want help, and they simply limit themselves to observing. At that moment, the man receives another blow from the creature while he remembers how once the danger was over, he woke up under the trunks, seeing around him the destroyed village and the corpse of his companion. As he headed towards the cafeteria, he had the unpleasant surprise of seeing his daughter already deceased, which deeply saddened the man. Seeing his daughter's medallion gives him enough strength to get up once again and continue facing the beast. While they were slowly approaching him, activating his drill, Inyou, with his power, managed to tie one of its feet, causing it to slip, and Taboo managed to fire a shot into its mouth, which passed through the monster's skull, killing it instantly. Back in the cafeteria, Inyou appears with the intention of making him a coffee. However, seeing that it seems impossible, he simply decides to return his daughter's necklace, which he lost during the fight. Seeing that Inyou is someone with a good heart, Taboo decides to buy him a cup. Zero enters Inyou's office and sees a woman sitting on top of him, feeding him. Shocked, she asks who she is, and Inyou says she's his new secretary. The woman then asks who Zero is, and he casually replies that she's like a pet, which stuns Zero. Her shock grows when the woman licks pudding off Inyou. Feeling embarrassed and nervous, Zero suddenly wakes up and realizes it was just a nightmare. Jealous that she even dreamed of her teacher looking happy, she decides she needs to get closer to him and become an adult. While he sleeps, she sneaks out to a clothing store where she finds an adult outfit she likes, but it's very expensive. Amelia suddenly appears and asks why she isn't with Inyou, to which Zero responds that today is personal. Seeing Zero looking at the outfit, Amelia asks if she wants to try it on. Though Zero refuses at first, she eventually agrees, albeit reluctantly. She tries it on, but since she's too short, the suit is way too big. The saleswoman complains that they don't have smaller sizes. So, Zero tries on different outfits, but none feel right. As they leave the store, Zero admits she wants to look more grown up. Just then, Daysum appears and invites them to eat pudding, which makes Zero happy. While eating, they talk about Zero's wish to seem more mature. Hearing this, Daysum suggests changing her hairstyle and takes her to a stylist. After trying multiple hairstyles, none seem right until they dye her hair dark. Remembering the woman from her nightmare, Zero feels the style makes her look more adult. Everyone agrees she looks more mature, but Daysum points out the real problem. She's still very short, so they go to Dendon's shop to see if he has medicine to make her taller. He says he does, but there's a catch. Daysum assumes it's about money and offers to pay any amount, but Dendon explains that the medicine isn't here. It comes from a rare fruit in Magmel. He shows them a book about it, but admits he's unsure if it even exists. Amelia suggests they go find it, surprising Dendon, who is then forced to guide them. When he asks how they'll travel, Daysum takes them to a giant pool where a massive helicopter emerges. Before boarding, Amelia asks Zero if it's really okay to go without telling Inyou. After thinking it over, Zero says yes. In Magmel, Dendon is nervous about the dangers, but Daysum arranges a fancy meal with candles and wine. As they eat, a small lion-like creature with wings approaches. Dendon panics, remembering his past humiliation with a turtle, and aims his weapon at it, wanting to prove himself to Amelia. While others doubt if he should shoot, Zero calmly feeds the creature a carrot, revealing it's a vegetarian, which stuns Dendon. They continue their journey, encountering various creatures until they reach the first fruit. Zero asks Amelia to lift her, but she misses by a few centimeters. After several attempts, they finally grab it but lose balance and fall on Dendon. To test the fruit's effects and ensure it's not poisonous, Zero forces Dendon to eat it first. At first, nothing happens, but then he stands up and realizes his legs have grown extremely long. Since this fruit wasn't the right one, they move to another in a swamp. Dendon slips, accidentally eats it, and his head stretches out comically. Seeing that this fruit also isn't correct, they decide to try another one that looks like a mushroom. Together, they convince the seller to be their test subject again, making him try another fruit. This time, it makes his entire body grow huge. Once he shrinks back to normal, they suddenly feel the ground shake from the footsteps of a massive creature, a giant snail that doesn't even react to the butler's machine gun fire and knocks them down with its tentacles. Everyone prepares to fight, but when Dendon shoots it with a crossbow, the arrow breaks, showing how tough the monster is. Zero tries to distract it with his drone, but the snail releases spores that grow into plants, trapping them inside a cage and leaving them vulnerable. Just as it seems like the snail will devour them, Inyou appears and punches it, sending it flying. The snail attacks again, so Inyou tells them to escape while he handles the fight. While searching for a way out, the group decides to eat more of the strange fruits. Dendon refuses at first, but they force him. Inyou struggles to defeat the tough monster, but then the seller, now gigantic, destroys the plant cage, eats another fruit that makes his legs grow, and kicks the snail, knocking it off balance. Finally, they make the snail eat a fruit that stretches its head, and with a headbutt, they flip it over, allowing Inyou to strike its weak point and finish it off. Back home, Amelia, Daysum, and Dendon say goodbye, while Zero apologizes to Inyou for going to Magmel without telling him. She explains that she was searching for something from a book the seller had, but Inyou reveals he gave it to her and that it's fake. Even though Zero wants to say the book's events really happened, Inyou just tells her to bring it next time. She agrees, thinking about how much fun they had on the trip. Inyou fights a dinosaur-like creature and defeats it using a sword made from his powers. A couple thanks him for completing the job, and he leaves, where Zero congratulates him for doing well since they needed the money. There was only ketchup left in the fridge. Inyou says they'll have steak for dinner, but Zero warns him not to spend too much, so they decide to have crickets instead, since they're cheap and tasty. Their conversation is interrupted by laughter, and when Inyou investigates, he finds a man playing with a two-headed snake that's tickling him. Inyou, confused, asks what he's doing, and the man explains that he studies the local animals, as Magmel is full of new and unknown creatures. He assures them the snake isn't dangerous, and it slithers away. The man introduces himself as Rupert, but before shaking hands, he gets startled by a steel dragonfly. He explains that these insects are as hard as diamonds, making them painful for predators to eat. Then, he points out a landfish that evolved to walk using lungs. While talking, Rupert invites Inyou to follow him to his favorite place. When they arrive, they see a massive tree with hanging nests. Inside one, 3 chicks of a rare bird wait to be fed, and Rupert happily feeds them. Suddenly, a dinosaur-like creature with a flower-like head catches Rupert's attention. He approaches it without knowing what it is, but Zero quickly pulls him back as the creature releases a gas. Inyou creates an arrow to scare the animal away, a ball to distract it, and a fan to clear the gas. When he checks on Rupert, the man is more worried about the chicks. Meanwhile, not far away, 2 men named DJZ and Baby Fat are filming a video. Their plan for the day is playing darts, but instead of a dartboard, they've tied a rodent to a tree with a target on its chest. They argue about how it's not exciting since the animal looks weak, then DJZ throws a dart, killing it. Back with Inyou and Rupert, Inyou explains that breathing in the monster's gas causes hallucinations of things people don't want to see. Rupert, visibly disturbed, admits he's been struggling lately as he's been finding animals dead, crucified, mouths stuffed with stones, or cut into pieces. Meanwhile, DJZ and Baby Fat aren't happy with their video, complaining their victims died too fast. Just then, they notice some birds and chase them to the tree with the nests. DJZ decides to burn the tree for more views, pours oil over the nests, and sets them on fire. Inyou and Rupert spot the rising smoke and rush toward it. When they finally arrive, the tree is already completely burned, deeply disturbing Rupert. When Rupert sees that his beloved chicks have been burned, he remembers how he first found them when their nest had fallen. He had tied it back to the tree so they could survive. Inyou then tells him the fire was intentional because the tree burned too quickly for it to be natural. He sends Zero to investigate while Rupert mourns. Meanwhile, DJZ and Baby Fat talk about how dangerous but exciting it was, and how good the video will be. After Rupert buries the chicks, Zero finds the arsonist's video channel and spots them nearby. When Inyou tells Rupert, he asks what he plans to do. Overcome with rage, Rupert pulls a knife from his backpack and goes after them. When they confront those two and ask why they did it, they try to dodge the question, but Rupert insists they admit they killed the birds. DJZ claims there are no real animals in Magmel, only monsters. Rupert explains the chicks lost their mother and had little chance of survival in such such a harsh place. But DJZ argues that Rupert is just another predator, making their deaths inevitable. He then mocks Rupert by asking if he eats meat, calling him a hypocrite for defending some animals while eating others. This makes Rupert angrier as he tells them they shouldn't kill for fun, but DJZ keeps teasing him. The argument escalates until DJZ, seeing an oil lizard nearby, decides to set it on fire, believing it will burn well. Furious, Rupert tackles DJZ, punching him and demanding an apology. Terrified, DJZ calls for help, but Rupert pulls out his knife and insists he apologize again. The tension builds until Inyou suddenly interrupts by showing them the unharmed lizard, explaining that it doesn't burn. He then scares Baby Fat by joking that since they cooked it, he should eat it. Horrified, Baby Fat runs away. Left alone, DJZ faces Rupert, who demands an apology once more, preparing to stab him, but Inyou stops him, saying he shouldn't become like them. He warns they need to leave because monsters are approaching. They tie DJZ to a rock and tell him the same plant creature from before is coming. As he yells to be freed, they walk away. A drone brings a poppy seed near the monster, which releases its hallucinogenic gas. Laughing at its small size at first, DJZ soon panics as he sees his worst fears. Watching from a distance, Rupert asks what DJZ is seeing, and Inyou simply replies that everyone has fears. Back in the city, Zero uploads the video humiliating DJZ and Baby Fat, making them so ashamed they won't dare show themselves in public or repeat their actions. Rupert admits he had wanted to kill, but thanks to Inyou, he realized he was wrong. He thanks them for their help before leaving. Later, on a helicopter, Inyou jokes that they'll have steak for dinner, but when Zero tells him not to get too excited, he laughs and says croquettes will do. One night, Zero has a nightmare where she wakes up tied up with shackles on her hands and feet. From a long hallway, she hears footsteps approaching her cell, and an old man appears through the bars, terrifying her. A red-haired boy of her age watches as the old man pulls out a remote and presses a button, electrocuting her. She wakes up in her bed, still scared, unable to shake the old man's cruel smile from her mind. Hearing a noise, she checks Inyou's room and finds that he just fell out of bed while sleeping. Feeling relieved, she touches her head and goes back to sleep. In the morning, she notices Inyou woke up before her, which is very unusual, and jokes that it must be the end of the world. He tells her he has errands to run and will be gone all day. When she offers to make breakfast, he declines in a rush, making her even more worried. After he leaves, she notices a strange mark on the calendar and decides to meet her friends. Though they don't think it's strange for him to leave early without breakfast, Zero insists it's unusual for him. While discussing what could have made him act this way, Zero recalls the note on the calendar. Chester suggests it might have to do with Schwinn, and Emilia asks if she ever met him. Zero says no, because when she met Inyou, Schwinn was already gone. When they ask how she met Inyou, she remembers the old man threatening to electrocute her if she didn't capture Inyou. As she grabbed Inyou by the neck, he simply stroked her head and reassured her that everything would be fine because someone had asked him to find and protect her. Snapping out of her thoughts, she casually tells her friends that she just picked Inyou up, surprising them. Meanwhile, a hooded man secretly watches them from the bar and transmits the images to the old man, Barton. A gunshot suddenly rings out. It's the bartender Taboo, telling them to be quiet or leave. From his secret base, Barton orders his hooded men to move out. Meanwhile, Inyou arrives at a large wooden house in Magmel where he once lived with Schwinn. He cleans every corner, then rests and recalls his farewell with Schwinn. When Inyou asked if they'd meet again, Schwinn said probably not, but reminded him to keep his promise to protect Zero. Inyou then went to a huge base in the sea where Zero was once held. Later, after leaving her friends and returning home, Zero happily goes to Inyou's office, but is horrified to see who is sitting at his desk. While Inyou says goodbye to the house and heads back, Zero suddenly remembers the tortures she suffered as a child. The man greets her as Unit Zero. Before she can react, a hooded henchman attacks, but she angrily declares that this is her teacher's chair. Meanwhile, more henchmen spread through the market. Barton reminds her that he is her true master and shows her a new version of the device that once electrocuted her, asking if she wants to try it. She declares that she is no longer an experiment. Barton then tells her she may not feel the same after seeing something. Suddenly, Dendon appears on a large screen next to a hooded man. Zero demands to know what Barton is planning, and he tells her that everything depends on her answer. In another part of town, a shopkeeper is about to kick out a strange, silent customer. After a small conversation with the little girl and not getting a response from her, he tells her that time is up and shows her what will happen if she doesn't obey. Blowing up his henchmen inside the store, thus killing Dendon, and after that, asking again who her true master is. But seeing the young woman in shock, he decides to encourage her again, showing her the rest of her friends, who, one after another, are approached by the rest of the henchmen, asking for the last time who her master is, under threat of eliminating the rest of her loved ones. She responds that he is her only master. All this happens while Inyou is arriving in the city with his helicopter. When he arrives at his base, a video is waiting for him, in which the old man appears. This makes him remember how he saved her once, when the old man wanted her to face one of the most dangerous beasts on the new continent to awaken her powers. However, once the girl was going to attack the creature, Inyou came out of her hair, accidentally receiving the blow. The old man apologized for having dirtied the room, and taking the girl as revenge, he teaches her how her friends are in danger. The memory of when he rescued her continues at the point where Barton orders Zero to catch the boy, threatening to electrocute her. But with his powers, he manages to destroy the controller after snatching it from the man's hands and hitting him hard, leaving a large scar on his face. On the cameras, you can see how each and every one of his friends is killed when his subordinates blow them up, something that disturbs Inyou. Meanwhile, Barton says that everything has just begun, showing him that his apprentice also has an explosive necklace, and tells him that he will be waiting for him since, as he stole everything, now the tables have turned. He warns him that they may not even want to meet again. This makes Inyou react. When he turns around, he realizes that he has a hooded man behind him with an explosive insect on his head that ends up exploding a few centimeters away from him. After this, Barton leaves the area in a van, laughing when he sees his plan fulfilled. At Barton's base, he remembers how Inyou destroyed his facilities and left that mark on his face. Now that his experiment was back in his cell, he began to remember all the tests he subjected the little girl to with the intention of activating her Lochter powers, making the decision to use pain and despair as a trigger. Now that the little girl was out of energy, he then activated her device and gave her a huge shock. Back in the present, a devastated Zero just wanted to be with her master again, and was beginning to worry if he was okay, praying and trying to make herself believe that he was still alive and would come to save her. After that, they served her food through a small crack in the wall, so she, curious, decided to look out to see what was on the other side, seeing more boys around her age locked behind bars. That's when she recognized number 6, a boy she saw there earlier, and who was a little angry with her since he said she always got special treatment. When she asked him if he was also a Lochter, he answered that he was once but not anymore, and after Inyou's attack, they managed to escape, but they were captured again since they were found because they lived on the street. So, as punishment, they took away their power, and that no one could save them, neither him nor her. But Zero answered that her teacher would come to rescue her, which made the boy laugh. A few seconds later, some hooded men came to take him away. The old man who was in his office watched through the cameras how Inyou managed to escape the attack and thought that everything that lay ahead would be fun. There, we were shown how Inyou was able to save himself by creating a large shield in front of him, and despite coming out somewhat bruised, he managed to escape from the building with the helicopter and was now on his way to rescue his precious friend. After this, number 6 was taken to Barton, who thanked him for the wonderful gift they gave him, referring to his powers, and now that they were no longer of any use, he wanted them to do him one last favor. That's when a large glass plate separated the two, and insects came out of devices that ended up landing on the young people's heads, clinging with their stings. The screams of pain scared Zero, who was listening from her prison. At night, Inyou arrived at Barton's maritime base, who realized his presence when alerted by the cameras and contacted Zero, showing her how her master died. After watching this video, the last hopes that the little girl had disappeared while the old man waited for the arrival of Inyou, Zero cried uncontrollably, remembering each and every moment she spent with her master since he rescued her, on the missions, the assignments, and thinking about everything she learned and enjoyed with him. Once at the base, Inyou infiltrated in stealth until some huge pipes began to fall on him, but luckily he avoided them until he reached a room where some hooded men were waiting for him. At that moment, a screen descended from the ceiling on which a live video of Barton was projected, explaining to him that his subordinates had the same mechanism as before. When Inyou asked him why he decided to do it all now, the old man answered that he needed time to prepare because of him, since he destroyed a lot the last time they saw each other. They both continued talking until the old man told him that he was much stronger now. However, Inyou Inyou didn't seem to care about this and asked him where his friend was, to which Barton replied that she was in the next room. However, he didn't need to know something like that, but Inyou kept asking him again and again until he wore out the man's patience, who ordered his subjects to put an end to him. One after another, they pounced with the intention of catching him. However, due to his skills, he avoided them all until the old man blew up one of his henchmen, but Inyou managed to avoid the explosion by hiding behind a column. Barton, realizing this, had them surround him and exploded 3 of his lackeys, but he was badly surprised when he realized that Inyou managed to avoid the blow by covering himself with one of the hands created with his power. However, he had been trapped under a piece of pillar, leaving only one of the henchmen alive, which was number 6, and giving a quick cut with his sword, he managed to remove the necklace, thinking that this would stop the explosion. However, Barton answered that that was not the way to avoid it, thus lighting up the bug on his head, ending with a large explosion that made Inyou hit one of the pillars. That's when the old man entered the room and saw that Inyou was injured. However, he only repeated the question of where his friend was, and after getting up, he created a sword with his power and went towards the old man, who suddenly pierced the boy's leg with another sword, revealing that he now also had the power of a lactor. And now that he had this power, he was much stronger. Barton reveals how he got his powers by transferring them from number 6 before killing his subject. He tells Zero that even after collecting 58 loctors, it wasn't enough. So Inyou, being so strong, is the perfect opponent to test his new power. After a brief exchange where they challenge each other, Inyou stands up and creates a grenade in his hand, but Barton stops him. He reminds Inyou that he has the remote that could activate his friend's explosive, and that a real fight needs to be fair, especially since Inyou is just a rookie. He presses the button, detonating a necklace buried in the ground. The explosion frightens Zero in her cell, and Barton mocks Inyou for taking things so seriously. He attacks Inyou repeatedly, but after noticing his sword, he decides not to use it since he wants to enjoy the fight. Instead, he transforms it into a spiked bat and swings at Inyou. His first hit misses due to Inyou's tool belt, but he keeps attacking, hitting him hard and knocking him around. Inyou then notices the door Barton came through, so he takes advantage of one of Barton's swings to create a grenade. The bat knocks the grenade towards Zero's cell, where it explodes, letting her know that Inyou is still alive, making her happy. Enraged, Barton attacks Inyou again and threatens to detonate another explosive, but Inyou tells him that if he rushes things, his revenge won't be complete since his only goal is to get back at him. Then Inyou asks Zero to remember something. As Barton changes his bat back into a sword, he cuts Inyou's back. This triggers Zero's memory of when she was saved and how Inyou became her new master, though he preferred to be called teacher. They introduced themselves back then, and she changed her name to Zero, marking the start of her free life. Seeing Inyou do nothing, Barton offers to free his friend if he kneels. Zero remembers how she once begged Barton for mercy, feeling helpless again. But after recalling how Inyou risked himself for her, she gets angry and activates her power, breaking free from her shackles and disabling the device trapping her. She sends a drone to stop Barton's attack, and Inyou creates a giant hand to punch Barton, knocking him out. Reunited, Zero apologizes for the trouble, but Inyou reminds her of his promise to protect her. She then suggests they leave since she's hungry. However, from above, Barton stands up again, declaring that he isn't finished yet. By eating a kind of fruit, he greatly increases his power, but something in his body begins to fail, and he falls from the observation deck to the floor of the cell, immediately transforming into a formless creature which attacks them, and an exchange of blows begins, which stops suddenly when Inyou cuts off his head. However, the creature begins to regenerate, and the fight continues. So, while the boy dodges the attacks, he notices that there is an exit at the top of the roof, where there is a huge fan, and asks Zero to take him up to the roof with her drone while she leaves the base. So Zero obeys as they begin to rise, pursued by the monster that begins to climb the walls without stopping attacking. And by a miracle, they manage to cross the propellers without being cut, not like the monster that ends up destroying the roof. But despite this, it does not stop, and now together they begin the last fight against the creature, which creates a huge hammer hitting towards the boy, believing he had ended his life, just to realize that it was on him that there were 2 giant hands, which crush him in the rest of the building against the ground, sinking under the sea. Already in a small boat, a little away from the site of the explosion, they both reunite, happy to be safe, while Inyou thinks that he fulfilled the promise he made to Schwinn. And when he turns to his apprentice, he sees that she is sad because of the death of her friends, but he teaches her that this is not the case, contacting them, where they explain that both Chester and Amelia survived due to the ship's defenses, while Daysum survived due to the armor of his limousine, and Taboo had time to hide in the shelter of the store, but Dendon was simply lucky and survived despite being badly injured. Finally, Zero asks Inyou where he went the day before, to which he answers that he went to Shoin's house since he goes there once a year to clean it, to finally tell her that one day the secrets of the new continent will be revealed, and that day he wants her to be with him. Once home, they both remember how happy they are to have each other.
With that, our story reaches its end. However, the fun doesn't just stop here. You can subscribe our channel and ring that notification bell icon for more updates regarding more fascinating stuff. See you guys in the next one.